Let me see how quickly I can get you up to speed here. There is this first century AD historian named Josephus. He was Jewish. He worked with the Romans. And obviously, he wrote a lot of stuff about the history of the Jewish people and about what happened during New Testament times, during the times that correspond with the life of Jesus and the early church. So understandably, he's really famous both because of the size and scope of the work that he did, but also because he's talking about the moment in history that probably the most people by percentage in the history of Earth are interested in. The first century AD in and around Jerusalem. This is pretty important stuff. Now you would think that this guy at some point would have something to say about Jesus if Jesus were a real person. And sure enough, Josephus does mention Jesus. There's one little paragraph. It's the most famous paragraph in all of the work of Josephus called the Testimonium Flavianum. It's so legendary that it even gets its own name. In this, Josephus, a non-Christian Jew, seems to corroborate pretty much all the big, important, even miraculous stuff about Jesus of Nazareth from the Old Testament, but he's doing so, writing a book that clearly isn't a part of the Bible. So if true, that would be a really big deal, and it would be really exciting to Christians. Well, before we get too excited, we just got to admit that scholars over the centuries have said, hey, there's no way Josephus would say that stuff about Jesus. This must be a later Christian edition that some ambitious scribe crammed into a copy of Josephus's work after the fact to make Jesus look good. It could be. I mean, that's what I've always been taught. That's what I've always assumed. But recently, a scholar with good credentials named Dr. T.C. Schmidt has written a book called Josephus and Jesus, New Evidence for the One Called Christ, in which he makes a bunch of new arguments about an old text saying, nah, I think the Testimonium Flavianum is reliable. He went so far as to tell me he's more or less positive that the Testimonium Flavianum, all that flattering stuff about Jesus from Josephus, a non-Christian from outside the Bible, is true. It's original, and it should be taken seriously and treated as such. Well, we just had a fantastic conversation, Dr. Schmidt and I, in my last video where he came on and he was kind enough to lay all of this stuff out for you and for me. He came off great, and you came off great in the comment section. I asked for your feedback, and you gave it. A lot of smart people weighed in there. You were good to each other. Thank you. Comment sections on YouTube are notoriously hot garbage. And yet around here, you continue to outshine everybody. So tip of the cap, I appreciate you. Both those of you who seem to like Dr. Schmidt's argument and those of you who are skeptical of Dr. Schmidt's argument raised the same question. And that's what I want to speak to in this video. And that question is this: how did Josephus know this stuff about Jesus? Who were his sources? Josephus is a little younger than Jesus, so it's not like he was there as an eyewitness to see Jesus do these things or to be there at the resurrection or the crucifixion. So how did Josephus know, and why should we take him seriously? What was his positioning here? Well, Dr. Schmidt speaks to that in his book as well. He talked to me about it on camera also. I just didn't put it in the video because I wanted to keep the video short and just get you the basics of the argument. But since you raised the question in the comment section, I went and pulled back out more stuff that I had from my conversation with Dr. Schmidt, and I figured I would let him speak to that. So with all of that said, let's go and chat with Dr. T.C. Schmidt about the question of how Josephus would have known or gathered the information he gathered regarding his claims about Christ.
Part two is when I look at where Josephus is getting his information about Jesus. And that's where I trace out that Josephus is commander in the Jewish war. Remember, he was also a general. So he was one of 7 generals, and his supreme commander, the guy directly above him, was this guy named Ananus II. And the crazy thing about Ananus II is he had James, the brother of Jesus, executed. So he executed Jesus's brother James, half-brother or step-brother, depending on your persuasion.
Sure.
And so already Josephus knows someone who knows the family of Jesus, who executed James, the brother of Jesus. But Ananus II didn't just do that. His brother-in-law was the high priest Caiaphas, who put Jesus to death. Yeah, Josephus tells us this. He's clear that his commander's father is Annas, and you go and you read the Gospels, and Annas is the guy at the trial of Jesus in the Gospel of John,
Yeah.
and he is the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who's also at the trial of Jesus.
Who also comes up in Josephus'
Josephus,
writing.
yes, yeah,
Okay.
and
That feels like the
and
kind of thing I should have caught. Um, okay. I'm kind of flabbergasted by that. That reframes Josephus entirely for me. Also, they're going
well,
to read the book. You got to think about that. We're going to make this video, and at the beginning, I'm going to go back after this, and I'm
mhm,
going to record a little intro, maybe over there at my desk, where I'm going to be like, "Hey, this is what we're doing," and then I'm just going to jump us in at an interesting spot. That'll happen in editing, right?
sure.
Well, I assume you're going to watch the video, so I'll
Mhm,
be cognizant of that as I'm recording it. Like, I wouldn't want to say something dumb or mean or that would make me, embarrass me in front of my new internet friend who wrote a cool book.
hmm,
We're cognizant of our audience, but a lot of times we forget that ancient authors would have been cognizant of their audience
mhm,
too,
mhm,
because they're people and they don't want
mhm,
to step in it and look like a moron.
mhm.
So what audience was he being cognizant of as he's writing all of this stuff? The people who are signing off on killing disciples and Jesus himself. Wow.
And
Nice catch, man.
it gets better, Matt.
Come on.
He he also you mentioned this guy before, Gamaliel, Rabbi Gamaliel in the
Hmm.
Sanhedrin in the book of Acts.
Hmm.
He was the head of the Sanhedrin. Peter says to him, "You killed Jesus."
Hmm.
Josephus knows the son of Gamaliel, Simon, and who also went on to be the leader of the Sanhedrin. So he has a second connection with someone with a family who was responsible for the death of Jesus. A second one, Gamaliel, and then the Ananan high priestly family in the Gospel of John. I lay out 10 candidates in the book and I name them, some of whose names you'll recognize. He knew, for instance, Herod Agrippa II. He was the guy who supervised the trial of the Apostle Paul in the book of Acts. He exchanged 62 letters with Herod Agrippa. Herod Agrippa calls him my dearest friend. Josephus
Really?
knows him.
uh,
He
that,
knows.
that's
Here's another one.
that's melting my brain. Okay, keep going. You got more. I want them all.
So he knows this one is a crazy one. Not all of these have the same level of certitude. So I gave you some two good ones. The other ones are plausible, but not as definite.
All right.
But you know Herodias, the story of Herodias. And then her daughter dances for the head of John the Baptist. It's
Salome
well, the
is
Gospels don't call her Salome, but Josephus does.
where
We
did I
know
get
her
that?
name because Josephus says her name. He
That's
says,
embarrassing. My Josephus and my Bible have mingled.
now,
Okay.
maybe you could contradict me. I'm pretty sure, I'm like 98% sure the Bible doesn't say her name. Josephus says Herodias. He's talking about Herodias. He says she had a daughter. Her name was Salome. And she only had one child, one daughter, Salome. And as he goes on to tell, Salome was probably, she got married and then her husband died in 33 AD, 33 AD. So she must have been about 15 or something when she was dancing in the gospel story. And because the gospels call her a girl, but then her husband's already dead by 33. So, and we know about roughly when folks would get married back then. So probably 13, 14, she got married.
Okay.
This is all important. She goes on to marry another guy, Aristobulus of Chalcis, who reigns forever. This guy reigns into the 90s, 92, 93 AD. He's the last Jewish king to be alive. Salome also reigns a long time. She's alive in the late 60s. We have coins with her face on it, Salome. Josephus knows their son, and we don't know this for sure, but it's very plausible that he knew one or both of them. I mean, he knows the Herodians. He's in that level of elite echelon of society. So this brings up, so in other words, like he at least knows the guy whose mother danced for the head of John the Baptist. Maybe knows her himself. These are all the kinds of connections I trace out to show that this Josephus guy, what he says about Jesus is the real deal. He has sources that we could only dream of. And what does he say? He says he worked paradoxa, these miraculous deeds, and that on the third day his disciples thought he was raised again.
I mean, even if we only count the connections that Dr. Schmidt can establish with certainty for Josephus, that still makes him unbelievably well connected with all the right people to be able to speak to the things about Jesus' life and early Christianity that he's speaking to. If we also grant Dr. Schmidt the arguments on some of those he wasn't quite as sure about, it puts him, that is Josephus, even more in touch with all of the royalty and the noble court and the upper class and the people who were in the loop and the movers and the shakers and the decision makers behind everything, the power families behind everything in first century Jerusalem and Judea. Josephus, then, to answer the question, was able to easily just go and ask friends of the family, people he palled around with, people he served with, exactly what it is that had happened. This wasn't a guy who heard some rumors and made stuff up. This is a guy who was sitting at meals again and again and again with the people who made the pivotal decisions regarding Jesus' execution, the martyrdom of disciples, the execution maybe even of Jesus' cousin, John the Baptist. Josephus was right there keeping company and breaking bread with these people and would have heard the stories time in and time out over the course of his life. Now, I think he was connected and positioned well enough to know exactly what he was talking about. So obviously, this doesn't prove once and for all that Jesus is the Son of God, God in the flesh, everything about the Bible is true. There's more stuff you're going to have to think about to sort all of that through. What this is, though, is something that looks like a credible acknowledgement of the reality of Jesus from someone who is critical of him from outside the Bible, but who was 1 inch outside the Bible and connected with all kinds of important pivotal characters and who would have been incredibly well positioned to speak to the reality of the stuff about Jesus. I think it's pretty compelling. Again, I can't wait to hear what you think about it down in the comment section. There's a link also for a free version, full text version of Dr. Schmidt's book. I hope you'll check that out as well. All right, that's plenty for now. I'm Matt. Thanks for hanging out with me on my YouTube channel. Let's do this again soon.